And now this latest move by Israel and the United Arab Emirates has sparked outrage across Muslim countries, in particular Turkey, Palestine, and many others. So what does this normalization mean for the future of relationship between the Arab world and Israel? Why is this normalization process taking place right now? Let's discuss this further. Joining us now live in the studios is Dr. Mohammed MAKRAM BALAWI. He's the manager, League of Parliamentarians for Al-Quds. Thank you very much for being with us on this special transmission. I mean, no one was expecting this move. It comes at a time when Israel recently announced that it is going to annex lands of Palestinians, which is a grave violation of international law, a grave violation of humanitarian laws, I must say. So do you think this normalization process is in any way going to benefit Palestinians?
On the contrary, actually, the Palestinian Authority and all the Palestinian factions, they denounced the move, and they considered it as a stab in the back. It comes as a service to President Donald Trump and his partner, Benjamin Netanyahu, who are about to lose power in their countries. So it is basically to give the impression that these people are successful and they are doing much for the Israelis, who are very active in U.S. politics and have a very strong lobby over there.
Okay. Now, here's where it gets very interesting. The United Arab Emirates is claiming that this latest move is going to stop Israel from annexing lands of the Palestinians. But do you really think that is true?
This is actually, we can never take it seriously, because if they were serious in this regard, they should have coordinating with the Palestinians. Palestinians know nothing about it. All the Arabs who sat in Beirut and made the Arab Initiative, they are not aware of the move, it seems to be. So how the Palestinians should wait for the UAE to make the move and they have to consent it? That's actually ridiculous.
Okay, now moving forward, and let me broaden the discussion a little bit. Palestinians have been living under Israeli occupation for decades. And now, especially during the presidency of Donald Trump, we have seen Israel taking unilateral actions, which has resulted in more oppression, more violations of humanitarian laws, more violations of international law. And on the other hand, it seems countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE have also started to side with Israel, especially when Israel has started to take unilateral actions. What do you think is going on in the Arab world?
I think this is against the interest of the Palestinian people. Palestinian people need support. They do not need anybody to speak for them. They can speak for themselves. They have been negotiating with Israel for the last 30 years. And the sum is almost zero. Now, after 30 years of negotiation, Israel declared the project of annexation. So what does it mean? They were just buying time. The Arab countries, including UAE and Saudi Arabia, if they want to help the Palestinian people, they should stand by the Palestinian people. And by the way, the world, when it stands with the Palestinians, it stands by itself, because they uphold the meaning, the real meaning of freedom and liberty. Otherwise, this world could go into chaos if everyone claims that he represents the interests of other countries. So Palestinians do not need the UAE and Saudi Arabia to speak for them.
Okay, and what does this move tell us about the leadership role being played by countries such as the UAE and Saudi Arabia? I mean, they're also part of the OIC, but what are they doing, the Palestinians
This is actually unfortunate because many countries, they have put their trust in Saudi Arabia and UAE. When they see them act in this way against the interests of the Palestinian people, they lose faith in them. Saudi Arabia considers itself as a leader of the Muslim world. So how Islamic is this move? We have to think about it. So Saudi Arabia and UAE, they're about to lose a lot when they side with Israel and claim that their partnership with Donald Trump over what is called the deal of the century is useful or could yield any benefit.
This was my point exactly. The deal of the century and other unilateral moves, it was the deal of the century designed by Jared Kushner.
Yeah.
It was more of an economic package for the Palestinians, which would basically take away more rights from them. So we have seen similar moves being taken by the Israelis, backed by President Donald Trump. But again, countries such as Egypt and Saudi Arabia, the UAE, they have turned a blind eye to the plight of the Palestinians. So what do you think the international community, in particular countries such as Turkey and other leading Muslim nations, should do to raise concerns of the Palestinians on different platforms?
First of all, we should not slip into the quagmire of normalization, because normalization is very harmful to the Palestinian cause and very harmful to the part which is doing it. We should know that Israel has always rejected UN resolutions. It doesn't respect international law. It gives a very bad example to other countries. It doesn't believe in peaceful resolution of any conflict, which actually could pull the leg of all countries into the circle of conflict. We demand that Turkey and the rest of the Muslim world stand by the Palestinian people, and let the Palestinians speak for themselves. Let them go into even a resistance with the Israeli occupation till they get their rights and independent state.
Okay, now another important point I would like to talk about is the United Nations. There have been resolutions in the past, but has anything really happened? The Palestinians are still living under Israeli occupation. Countries usually veto anything which is in favor of the Palestinians. This is what we have seen happening recently, especially during the Trump presidency. So how do you think Palestinians can activate the UN bodies to do something about the latest developments?
Palestinians are not detached from their environment. They are not detached from the Arab world and the Muslim world, the Muslim Ummah. This actually reflects the lack of solidarity between Muslim countries. If there is a real solidarity in the Muslim countries, among Muslim countries, there should be some impact on the UN resolution and UN behavior. This actually is not the problem of the Palestinians only. The Muslim world and the Muslim Ummah, they should sit together and reach to some kind of agreement. There should be some representative in the Security Council for the Muslim world. I think even Turkey demanded for a permanent seat for one of the Muslim countries, but the voice was never heard because of that lack of solidarity.
Okay, now another important point I would like to talk about is the role of international community. Let's broaden the discussion a little bit. Let's talk about the world as a whole. Countries which are not Muslim countries. I mean, the European Union calls itself a champion of human rights. Many other countries also call themselves champions of human rights, but have they really done something for the Palestinians who have been subjected to violence, who have been subjected to grave human rights violations? And it's not something which happened a few days ago. It has been happening for decades, but still we have not seen any concrete measure taken by the international community to do something about Israeli occupation. In fact, what we are witnessing is more and more unilateral moves by Israel. For example, the embassy in the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, then the annexation of Golan Heights. What do you think Israel's end game is here, and how can the international community
Actually, we should not be under any kind of illusion, because Western European countries, they founded the state of Israel on the land of the Palestinian people. So to say that they will liberate the Palestinian people is irrational and impractical. The maximum we could expect from them is they should at least respect the human rights of the Palestinian people and reject the apartheid state. Although the problem of Palestine is not a humanitarian problem, it is a political problem. This is a nation which actually wants its own independence and its own state. And the whole world, especially the 5 permanent members in the Security Council, they have been declining and doing nothing about it. And the Israelis always been forwarding and expecting no kind of boycott, punishment, nothing in return. So if the Europeans are serious in this regard, they should stop Israel, cut relations with Israel, boycott Israel on all levels. Then we can see a change in the Israeli behavior.
Okay, and my last question to you here, what would be your message to the international community, to the people who are watching you right now?
My message is that don't reward Israel by establishing diplomatic relations with it. This is actually very harmful to the Palestinian cause and to the cause of liberty in general. Unless Israel feel that it's going to pay a very heavy price, they will keep on defying international law and international organizations.
All right. Thank you very much for talking to us on this News Hour.